You're listening to Out of the Box, a place for marketers to get inspired, get going, and break out of the box.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Out of the Box, the podcast for out-of-the-box marketers. Today on the show, we have Adam Lovallo, who's a founder of Grocomau, better known, or potentially some of you may be more familiar with MAU, the very successful mobile conference, not behind, in front of Grocomau, who's going to be talking to us about community and trends in the mobile app ecosystem. Adam, thank you very much for being here today.
My pleasure.
So you've had quite a wide-ranging career, starting and running content for a really successful conference. You ran your own growth agency. Can you tell us how you ended up where you are today?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I joined what was then a 4-person startup in college as an intern. I was 19 at the time.
The dream.
Yeah, well, largely. That company was very active in the Facebook app development world, which has a lot of parallels to the mobile app ecosystem, actually. So we were building Facebook Canvas page applications. I was just an intern, though. Later, that business sort of pivoted and became a daily deals company. So it was called Living Social. Still kind of around today, was competitive with Groupon.
I remember them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just largely as a function of being there early, ended up in charge of what we at the time called user acquisition, which you might now call growth, which was basically paid UA, some product conversion stuff, retention stuff, et cetera. So that's how I got into the growth world, and starting the conference business, the conference series, was a kind of a natural extension of the work that I was doing day to day.
So did you run it sort of in parallel to your day job?
No, actually. So I was sort of coming to the end of my Living Social tenure. You know, it was a really great run, but the business was, I think, starting to struggle. We had raised a ton of money, and it frankly didn't look like it was going to be a great outcome. And so I thought, okay, well, what else could I do? Rather than joining another company as a head of growth, which would have been awesome too. I met a guy who became my partner, and he said, "Hey, don't you think there might be an opportunity to create like a community and a series of conferences around this quote unquote growth marketing trend?" And that was basically the entire gist of the idea, and that's what we did.
And did it feel sort of risky to say, okay, I've been doing paid UA, now I'm going to start a conference series? Or did it feel like you guys were at the beginning of catching a real wave, that growth marketing was going to take off, and you were going to be early to the sort of party in terms of offering a community alongside it?
Yeah, well, so my partner had started and run a very successful conference business in an adjacent vertical. He ran, well, founded and sold an event called LeadsCon, which is, if you're in the lead generation ecosystem, that's like the event. So I was pretty confident that he knew what he was doing, and I was also pretty confident that this growth marketing thing was going to stick as a concept. We were not sure of was, well, how long is it going to take for it to be successful? In what form will it be most successful? You know, what is the likely outcome? That was all a question mark, but I was pretty fundamentally confident that it made sense. And really, you know, there's a ton of conferences. Like, there's no shortage of conferences and online marketing content and so on. But I really still, even to this day, think that people that self-identify as growth marketers kind of are a little different, and it means something a little bit different, and they're largely underserved. Like, there's a million conferences about quote unquote online marketing, and I just don't think it really encapsulates what growth teams do every day. So I still think there's an opportunity, even beyond what we've done to date.
Well, you know what I'm going to ask. How are growth marketers different? And when you say growth, do you mean specifically mobile?
No, so I definitely don't specifically mean mobile, although that's a big part of it. And I'm talking about web, which these days is largely mobile web and native apps, and to a lesser extent other platforms. To me, it's a cross-functional skill set. That's largely what it is. So growth teams are more likely to be working on paid UA for sure, but also have a hand in, like user onboarding and the product, the underlying product itself. Some growth teams are in charge of monetization, retention via channels like SMS and email and push notifications. You might be more likely to have dedicated engineering, both front end and back end, designers, UX, etc., as part of a growth team. So, and that's just a part of it. Not to mention like data science and stuff, doing predictive LTV analysis, that sort of thing. So I really see it as a cross functional skill set. In some respects, pseudo technical. To be fair, I think a lot of people that call themselves growth marketers just deal with paid UA all day, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's kind of just rebranding the title marketing, basically.
Uh-huh.
But there are definitely growth teams out there that, to me, embody what it really means. That have that cross functional sort of scope.
And where are Groco and MAU today? And you don't even have to answer from the Corona perspective. We can get to that later. But kind of from all other things being equal.
Yeah. So we kind of started to focus on the MAU event, which is our mobile apps event, because it was just the most successful, and I just thought it was resonating the best. So that became our primary focus, almost our sole focus. And minus coronavirus, that event, has grown year over year. We continue to attract more people internationally and more people from other verticals. The event sort of started out like diehard mobile folks like Zynga and Uber and whatever. But now you've got all kinds of companies coming out of the woodwork that are interested in, well, fundamentally networking, but also just have a mobile app that's consequential. That's really the prerequisite. So the plan is to keep going pretty much. I think it's a useful event for the ecosystem, for the industry, and so our intention is to keep it going. But like when I take a step back, it's hard to predict these things, but it's really hard for me to imagine that event won't continue to grow over time because the mobile app space, really the
Continues to
mobile
grow.
space, yeah, it's growing tremendously. And it's not really just about a couple big Silicon Valley companies and gaming, which is what it was, 5 years ago. It's really about every business potentially.
So in Iron Source, I think we start more content in other forms, and over the last couple of years we've really taken content onto our events or into our event strategy. Do you see a kind of opposite trajectory for MAU, where you'll go from a very, very successful conference to branching out into other forms of content or other vehicles for delivering content?
Potentially. We've thought about, particularly in light of all the Corona stuff, well, should we have a podcast? Should we have original written content, etc.? I think there's something about in-person events that is, you can't easily recreate. As an aside, I hate webinars. So I'll just put that on the table. Like, if somebody in the world enjoys watching a webinar, I would love to meet them, because it's absolutely the worst fucking format on the planet. So like, so yeah, we're so partial to in-person events. We probably will launch something, but it's a challenge. Like for an event organizer, you can sell tickets and you can sell sponsorships, and as a business, the economics can work. You can
Work
really
out.
invest in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The challenge is that even if you write the absolute best blog post, research report, whatever, the best one in the world, it's still a very targeted subject matter that we're talking about. So you might only drive a couple hundred readers or a couple thousand readers, and media in that form, as your user acquisition listeners well know, is often sold in CPM terms. So I could write a killer blog post, sell it at $100 CPM for a sponsorship that surrounds it, and generate $100. That's just part of the challenge of like B2B publications. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know for sure.
And speaking of content, how have you seen? I mean, you've talked a little bit about how the event and attendance has, or type of diversity of attendance has shifted, but what about trends? What topics have you seen remain relevant year after year, and what are some of the new things that have popped up, which I mean, I know you added a gaming track. I don't know if it was, I think last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
How have you sort of seen content trends change?
Well, so years ago, it was really the ecosystem was so new that discovery in and of itself was part of the value. Like, oh, I have never heard of solution provider X. I should learn what they do, you know? Um, that's no longer the case. Certainly, if you're new to the ecosystem, you're launching an app or something, you might be debating between which MMP to use or which user acquisition sources to buy, et cetera. So there's still lots of things that are new to lots of people, but by and large, our industry is relatively well understood. The major players are clear on the solution provider side and the media sources side. So the discovery element has diminished. That's a trend. Number two, uh, paid UA is a big driver in the mobile space because, as everybody knows, the app stores are great, but there's an absolute incredible number of apps in there. So discoverability is a challenge. You're not usually going to just push an app into the app store these days without some paid promotion behind it and be successful. So that's still a big focus. That said, I think everybody recognizes that um, just running campaigns with the right partners, Facebook, Google, Iron Source, and others, is insufficient to be competitive. Like creative is a huge driver. How effective the app is in retaining people, from a product standpoint, is a huge driver. How effective the app is in retaining people from a CRM standpoint is a huge driver. Like basically, there's not that much leverage, in my opinion, in the pure media mix. It's relatively well understood if you know what you're doing, where you should be spending money. So you have to compete on making your dollars more efficient so that you're inherently more competitive in these auctions. So that's where I think a lot more content and interest falls. It's like, okay, well, what could I do, whether it's on the creative side to make my users 10% less expensive to acquire, or on the product and CRM side to make them 10% more valuable, because I know that extra 10% spread might enable me to increase the scale by 50%. It's not a linear relationship always. So that's kind of how I've thought about the space as I think about finding speakers and stuff.
What do you think would have been the highlights of this year's MAU?
Oh man, I don't even know. Well, honestly, from the beginning, like I'm not really a conference person. I actually generally
Wow,
dislike
really?
conferences. Yeah, seriously. I think they're usually a waste of time. And so, in putting together with MAU, I always intended, I said, well, how could you put content together that's useful? Whether or not people sit through the sessions in person or watch them subsequently, recording wise, doesn't really matter. That's fine either way. But like, can they be useful? And so for that reason, I always tell everybody, hey, like you're doing this work day to day. I'm not, right? It's been years since I have. So just take something that you actually are doing in your job that's interesting and describe it. And that's it. And don't be too worried about being super strategic, some high level esoteric concept. Just describe some like little test you ran, and that's going to be more useful to everybody in the room than anything else. So I always say, hey, it's all about tactics, not strategy. And for that reason, the agenda is pretty random. We don't try to superimpose some
Theme.
macro theme. I think that's so stupid. It's just like, hey, you've got this is an industry of relatively experienced people, so just let them talk about stuff that if it's interesting to them, it's probably going to be interesting to the room. So yeah, it's that's I'm I personally am more interested, I think, in the like product and CRM sort of subject matter. Um, uh, Even though my background is in the user acquisition side, and I know that the best. So we had a lot of cool talks lined up there, but I'll at our next event we'll hopefully reprise a lot of those speakers, and it'll be great. So.
And we've talked, I mean, I mentioned that you added a gaming track
Hmm.
to MAU, and certainly we've seen mobile gaming pick up steam over the last few years. And in fact, a podcast I recorded a few days ago, we talked about how, first of all, how growth inside gaming growth does encompass pretty much what you've described, right? A lot more than just I'm running my campaign, I'm doing my page UA, and now I go home. And that to a large part, game companies have perfected that ability of or that approach of widening the relevance or the sphere of impact of growth or sphere of responsibility, maybe. Do you think that the game industry has had an impact on the wider mobile industry, and will it continue to do so?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a given. Like, basically in the mobile space, gaming advertisers are probably pound for pound the most sophisticated because they're in the most competitive market, not just domestically but internationally. I say that as a U.S. person, um, and
In case it wasn't clear.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Can tell from my accent. Um, and no, that's going to continue. I mean, everybody in the mobile space looks to gaming as yeah, as like the bellwether for the industry. So, and you even see a lot of people coming out of the gaming world and moving into non-gaming categories to try to infuse that kind of DNA. And to be fair, like I'm not saying that mobile gaming people are like God's gift to the earth. Well, uh,
They're just
people,
forced to be more kind of.
yeah, it's just you got
I
to
think
compete.
probably,
You got to
yeah.
compete.
Yeah, it's a little bit like what you were describing earlier. Sort of, if you there originally it was just the store, and then it was expanding your or diversifying your media mix, and then it became creatives and sort of product CRM, etc. I think probably all of those successive, how do you put it, kind of thresholds of competition were breached inside the gaming industry first, potentially before trickling out to the larger
No
mobile
doubt, and
industry
it
at
and it,
large.
it it predates the mobile app ecosystem. So, like,
Also,
who are the most competitive Facebook app developers? Companies like Zynga and Playdom, right? So that's not a coincidence. And it predated the Facebook app ecosystem, just regular
yeah.
HTML games and stuff. So, like, I think it's just a rule of thumb in online advertising that is always going to be one of the most casual gaming, I think in particular, is always going to be one of the most like cutting edge tactically. Yeah, that's definitely the case even today.
Mm. And this is a slightly off-piste question, but what would you say is one of the challenges of marketing to marketers?
Well, okay, so here I think it's just actually creating content that's useful. Like 99% of the research reports and blog posts, God bless them, but are written by people who don't do this. And so they're bad, like painfully
Yeah.
bad. Like there's huge companies, really sophisticated companies that, employ tons of really smart people, tons of really smart marketing people. And they'll write a blog post that's like, 5 tips to scaling UA during like the holiday season. Like number one, like make sure you customize your creatives so they're holiday focused. I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like this is a joke. So I think, yeah, I think authenticity and like quality is a really big challenge. However, one thing I found that user acquisition people do respond to, growth people do respond to, is like actual real examples of things. And so it's no surprise that probably the most effective and useful B2B content in the mobile ecosystem are index reports from like the mobile measurement providers, for example, describing these are the traffic sources that are the biggest and here's how they compare, rank in terms of volume and quality and whatever. And so, you've got AppsFlyer and Branch and all these guys putting together their own spin on that kind of an articulation, and they're very useful. It's like, oh, XYZ random programmatic network that I had never heard of, like, is actually really big in APAC. Like, I should call them. Like, so, yeah, so I think that's a good example of executing it well. But I now say this even as myself, outside of the Grow.co world, doing my own like services agency business, like easier said than done. Like it takes time and uh, writing. I try to write my own original content, and I thought, oh yeah, a good blog post will take me an hour. It takes me 10. So it's non-trivial. Yeah,
Yeah. I think it comes down, certainly we found this to be true. The more insistent you are on delivering real value with your content, the longer it's going to take you to do it. But if you get in the habit of creating valuable content, then that sort of gets easier over time. Because also you're not wasting your time with things like 5 tips to doing user acquisition during the holiday period,
yeah.
because that can take time too.
Perhaps that's true. You would know better than I would, honestly.
Um, so, last couple of questions. What do you, because I don't know if it's the elephant in the room, but we are living in Corona times now. What do you think is going to be the impact on in-person events?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I mean, I think in-person events have a ton of utility that cannot be replaced by online stuff. Maybe there's people out there who disagree with that statement, but I feel quite confident of that. Um, we're operating under the assumption that you could add a lot of additional safety precautions and hand sanitizers and so on, that could help mitigate things, but I'm not sure how long it will take the macro event ecosystem to kind of return to normal. It may take a very long time, but I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in the face to face networking aspect of it, and that's what we're planning on. As it stands, we have dates on the calendar. We postponed our event from May to September, and I think that's very likely to change again. Uh, so really we're looking towards next year, but yeah, I'm not sure how long it'll take, but
But the in-person event won't disappear.
I don't think so at all. I mean, anybody who thinks the in-person event is going to disappear, I volunteer you to watch 5 webinars and tell me if you think they're fucking useful. Like, I mean, no way. Like, there's just no utility. And I say this going back to my days. I was the head of user acquisition at a company spending 9 figures a year, US dollars. I had 15, 20 people on the team. Like, the only way I met people outside of my own company and industry was at events. Otherwise, I had literally no vehicle to do it. And it didn't help. I was in Washington, D.C., which is not exactly a tech hotbed. It's a
Hub.
bit easy. Yeah, it's easier for people in San Francisco, to a lesser extent New York. But like, I got a ton of value out of meeting peers from other categories and also vendors. Whether or not you work with a service provider, the service providers are exposed to more data points on a daily basis than any internal company, because by definition they work with many companies. So I look at my campaigns every day if I'm the CMO, but my account manager at ironSource probably works at 20. So like that has a ton of value. And again, I don't think the peer to peer or like the vendor to marketer dynamic is is replaced by anything other than in-person events in the long term.
Do you think vendor companies have gotten better at not at sort of leveraging their perspective to deliver truly valuable content,
No,
or is it no?
I don't.
I didn't
Um,
even need to give you an or.
I mean, there are exception cases, and obviously, all of this is completely subjective, and not everybody likes the things that I like. So who cares what I think? But no, I genuinely don't, and I say that because right after I hang up here, I'm going to put together my newsletter for the week, and I subscribe to like a billion RSS feeds, to the extent they're still out there, and tons of other newsletters, and it is a struggle to find stuff that I find personally interesting. And so the newsletter is just literally things that I find personally interesting. That's the only criteria. And so no, I think a ton of it is so lame. Like the lazy modern answer in Corona times is to conduct random interviews, hopefully not this one, and just be like, oh, we interviewed so and so who said nothing, like
Hmm.
nothing. I think part of the challenge is a lot of the data that vendors have is can't be shared because the clients don't want to share it, right? And so that's a fundamental challenge. I get that, um, but no, I think, like I said, 95% of the stuff that I read is like just a waste of time.
Last question.
Hmm.
What is the most out of the box marketing you've ever done or seen done?
So my favorite thing, this is random, but we were targeting small business owners. Okay, so we wanted to reach small business owners. We wanted them to work with us. So it was more of like a kind of SMB campaign, and made we sent a custom letter. It was a form letter, but we would mail merge in their name and market and city and so on. We sent case studies that were specific to their category. So if they were a baker or a restaurant or a skydiving place or whatever, we'd have relevant case studies. We made, and this is like kind of, I think, funny, Publishers Clearinghouse style checks. They're literally fake checks. So it's like, hey, we work with this merchant and they made $50,000, and it said void and stuff. We would hand sign them, like, so everything looked like it was personally sent, and then the key was we would send them via FedEx requiring signature. So
Wow.
when you get a package that requires signature,
You
especially if
think
you're a small
it's,
business, it's pretty
yeah.
serious. Like, could be legal or could be, I don't, who knows. So they work like a charm. They were very deceptive. So probably not. I don't know if it's the right thing to do in hindsight, but they work really well. Yeah, that's my favorite thing.
It sounds kind of like hacked ABM in a way.
Oh, totally, totally. It is, and it's not. But the key, I think, was the FedEx signature required thing, and we got to the point where we were sending. I had a team of guys, interns, many of whom are now my friends. This was years ago. We were sending, I think, thousands of these things a day because they took quite a bit of effort to put together. So yeah, we were we were like one of the larger FedEx volume mailers for a period of time in the Washington D.C. area. So yeah, that's a fun one. I'll never forget that.
Nice. I like it. Love the specificity. And great chatting to you, Adam. Thank you very much for being on the show today, and thanks everyone else for listening.
My pleasure.